You're listening to the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. Now here's your hosts, Kevin, Derek, and Alex.
Alrighty, welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. I am Derek, and I'm joined, as always, by your co-hosts, Kevin and Alex. Gentlemen, how we doing?
Doing good. We're halfway through July, and we have training camp starting like next week. And honestly, I'm just so excited. I'm so excited to finally get into it. We are in the dog days of summer. The MLB All-Star break is officially done. Second half of a long, drawn-out season is underway. And outside of that, unless you're a tennis or a golf enthusiast, there's not a whole heck of a lot going on. So you might as well be studying up for your fantasy football drafts, because that is about the only thing sports-related right now that is keeping me entertained.
You know what will help you study for your NFL fantasy drafts? Player profile videos, which will be available on the YouTube channel here. Probably going to get some of those starting up here in about another week or so. So this is the shameless plug. Go subscribe, youtube.com/@goodoldboysff. Click that little bell button. It rings ding-a-ling-a-ling type of thing. And that way you get all the notifications when those videos drop, because they're going to come quick, fast, and in a hurry.
Yeah, you guys should definitely do that. Appreciate you guys holding down the fort while I was off gallivanting around the Pacific Northwest and the Great White North, our neighbors to the north. It was a welcomed reprieve from the heat, although it was pretty hot up there too. But I bought a hoodie because I was on top of a mountain and I was cold. I will put that into storage because it's not going to be below 100 down here for the next, 6 months. So it was a lot of fun. Appreciate you guys allowing me to vacay with the family and keep this show rolling. I would like to point out it has been what are we going into now? Year 4 of this year?
Started 2019, so
Pokey
2023
podcast. Yeah,
4 years.
We are about to get to year 4. That'll come in October-ish time. Yeah.
We'll have a whole thing. I'll remind
you. We'll do a thing. And I got to tell you, what started as just, a couple guys hanging around talking about their home fantasy football league has turned into a weekly show that literally has never missed a week, right? Like you guys never missed a beat. I know I had to step away for a little bit before I came back this last year, this last football season. I needed to take some time, but a weekly podcast for you to talk, to hear and interact with NFL football. I don't want to call them takes because these are coming from a good place of knowledge. Everything coming from my two co-hosts. Everything coming from me, take with a grain of salt. I don't know what I'm talking about, but everything from my two co-hosts who regularly win fantasy football championships. A weekly basis, and we don't take the summers off. This isn't like, school teachers. God bless them for what they do. This is a weekly thing year round. So unbelievable that you guys keep this going. The dedication is impressive.
I was going to let you just keep going and going and going and going.
I was trying to find a way to stop that, but sometimes you just stop.
That's a move right out of my playbook. So
No doubt.
There was going to be a nice way to tie it all together, but yeah.
It's all good. It's been fun.
Real quick, couple of comments coming up. Smitty, who's been on the show before, saying, "Sup, boys?" Not a whole lot.
Smitty.
Just talking the fantasy football, and he's saying hit that like button. We appreciate that. Thank you very much, brother. Leadership Lessons also chiming in. Let's go, boys. Looking forward to the analysis. This should be a fun couple of teams to talk about, right? We're going to hit up the DeAndre Hopkins news on that and go through the player profile on that one. Hit that real quick for you guys. And then we got the Bengals and we got the Vikings to talk about. So again, a bunch of two teams that have a ton of fantasy relevance that is going to be a lot of fun to talk about here, and very interested to get into that one.
Hey, before we get to the D-Hop stuff, how about the running backs? It was kind of a rough day for running backs in the NFL. looking to get their bag, right? And they were pretty vocal about it on social media. Did you guys see any of this?
Yeah. And Derrick Henry was very vocal about that as
Christian
well,
McCaffrey,
right? Yeah. I heard some reports out there that a lot of these high profile running backs have actually started their own kind of text group amongst themselves and are talking back and forth about it. And so it's very interesting to kind of hear some of that and hear these guys really kind of banding together on this one. And I heard some different takes and analysis out there that even that the union should potentially, and I forget who said this when I was scrolling through Twitter and I saw it. So my apologies on who said it. It was not my original idea, but that they were making the claim that the union should go through and on rookie deals, make it where running backs have a much shorter rookie contract than any other position, actually negotiate that into the next collective bargaining agreement to the point where these guys are able to get into a second contract and really get paid like any other position group out there.
It really is tough. It is tough.
Careful what you wish for.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that wholeheartedly because they're unforeseen consequences, right?
Oh, there's tons, right? Like some of these guys don't pop until their third season, right? I mean, Derrick Henry's a prime example.
Right.
Yeah.
Because he was sitting behind who was that?
Was that
DeMarco Murray?
It was DeMarco Murray, and then who else? It was the guy who was splitting time with for his year 2 and year 3. Henry blew up year 4, right? Like that was where he came on the scene. So he sat behind Murray, and then Murray was traded.
Keep stalling, Kevin. Keep stalling.
And then after that, it was a timeshare, and Derrick Henry was playing second fiddle to a scat back, essentially in Tennessee for the next few. That's part of the reason why the age on Henry is a little weird, right? Like you expect him to be wearing down, but he split. He didn't really play his rookie season, then split time in years 2 and 3. So for his first contract, the amount of usage, if you will, was extremely minimal. And then year 4 came out and he blew up and they went, oh, crap. So
he was playing behind DeMarco Murray there. And then another name is Dion Lewis, who he split time with in 2018. Dion Lewis is the name there.
So, I mean, it's just kind of a prime example. You just got to be careful because you have 3. So what? They go 3 years if you're a first rounder and 2 years if you're not. Like, is that what?
Is that enough time to build a body of work to get?
How many of these guys are you going to blow through if they don't pan right away, right? Like you step in and you blow an ACL the first year. Okay.
Well, yeah.
You step in, you blow an ACL the first year right before the season starts. You blow it in training camp. Then the second year, right? Like you're still, unless you're Adrian Peterson, it kind of takes 2 years, right? Like your first year, you're back on the field, but you're like 80% of what you were. And then that next year out, you kind of look like yourself again. So I don't know. I just, I don't know. I see where it's coming from. And I think maybe they need a player option. Maybe that's the answer.
Yeah.
Is they run the same contract length, but after 3 years, running backs get a player option and kind of force the team's hand here a little bit. Because I agree. For the beating they take and what they're asked to do, they're underpaid.
Right.
In the scheme of football, right? They have to understand pass protection schemes. They have to understand route running concepts and where they're supposed to be in a timing perspective. And then depending on what offense you're in, you have to be able to zone, gap, or basically man run, right? And depending on how the offensive line is structured and understand where your hole is, where your cutback lanes are, all these other things. And they're getting, much like I think Austin Eckler said, much like there's third wide receivers getting paid more than running backs. Like that's a shame. Like, it should be well within somewhere, I'm going to call it 13 to 15 million should be the average. It should be for your top end back who is more of a workhorse, right? Your Saquon, your Jacobs, your Nick Chubbs, your Ecklers, your McCaffreys, that group, right? That obviously Derrick Henry, that group should be sitting around 15 million, right? I mean, good Lord, quarterbacks are making 40, 45, right. 50.
Yeah. To drive that point home even more for you, right? Like you mentioned, third wide receivers making more than that. Tim Patrick's cap hit this year for the Broncos, $11 million, more than what the franchise tender is for either Saquon or Josh Jacobs.
Yeah.
Like, this is a guy coming off of a major injury, right? And didn't play last year and is coming into his year 30 season. Like, yeah, that is one of those that just kind of drives that point home even more for you.
Yeah, pretty interesting to see what gets done because those are high profile names. I mean, you're talking about Saquon and Josh Jacobs, and now Tony Pollard. I mean, yes, he kind of blew onto the scene. He had been serviceable, but was playing second fiddle there to Zeke in Dallas. But I think it's just crazy if what I'm reading is correct, which I believe it is. If I'm interpreting it correctly, but they're the only 3 players who got franchise tagged who did not get a long-term deal attached to them. Of all the players that got franchise tagged this year, which I don't have that number of how many players actually got franchise tagged, because I know not every franchise uses a franchise tag on a player, but it is pretty crazy that they're the only 3 players this year that got tagged and did not get a long-term contract. So we'll see how it plays out. I mean,
it's disrespectful.
It is.
So I understand it. And, I understand why these guys are doing what they're doing. I understand that this is their shot at a real payday. And, this is where the franchise tag is bogus. Like, teams' feet need to be held to the fire a little bit, or even use like arbitration, right? It's one thing that baseball does have, right? Is their arbitration process, and it's convoluted and it's hard to understand, right? Like, if you follow baseball, you know that when it goes to arbitration, it gets messy, and then all of a sudden it's in favor of the team and it's this contract, or it's in favor of the player and it's this contract. And there's more to it than that, but something similar I think would be good for some of these guys, right? Like, any player who's getting franchise tagged is a star player of the franchise, right? That's why they're doing it. They
mean something to the franchise.
Every once in a while you see something random, like a kicker gets franchise tagged or something like that, just because, whatever. But 90% of the time plus, it is a quarterback, running back, or wide receiver. Like, you don't see a whole heck of a lot of defensive players getting franchise tagged.
Sometimes
every once in
like
a while,
a
corner, or tackle, or a corner, right?
Yeah.
But more often than not, it's a skill position player, and those guys, right, wrong, or indifferent, are more front-facing for name recognition, facial recognition, jersey sales, that the things that help the team's media and sponsorships and promos and all those things. Like, no one cares who your third middle linebacker is until you need him. But I mean, at the start of a season, when you're paying for people, no one cares who your third middle linebacker is. You're not getting excited over that, but you are getting excited to go see Saquon play, right? Like, that's an event. You're excited to check that out. Like, you like watching Josh Jacobs play. So I know we're kicking a dead horse here, and I'll get off my soapbox, but I wish these guys the best and do what's best for you and your families and your careers, because you get one shot at this, right? Like, the years of Frank Gore and Adrian Peterson playing 15 seasons, it felt like, are past us. Like,
Right.
you guys have one shot at this. Go get yours. Like, I fully support it. I will put my weariness as far as the fantasy perspective goes off to the side. It's a byproduct of, but for you guys as individuals, go get yours. You guys have earned it, and go get it.
Yeah.
So real quick, before we move on there, it's actually kind of interesting. I was pulling this up and found this out there that since 1993, running backs that were given the franchise tag and didn't get a long-term deal signed before the franchise tag kicked in was in 05, you had both Edgerrin James and Sean Alexander. 09 was Darren Sproles. 17 and 18 Lev Bell, and then the three guys this year. Like, this is becoming more and more apparent as the league kind of shifts away from using the workhorse running backs there, where they seemingly will draft a guy with a first round pick, get 5 years, and then tag him again. And that seemingly is kind of the end of what we see running backs in this league anymore, which, you know, to the point that you just made, these guys go out there and are, especially the guys that are getting franchise tagged, are incredibly valuable to the franchise and on every level there. And it is just, it's sad to see that that's the way things have become. So, well, are we ready to get into the DeAndre Hopkins? We have some other news that we want to talk about.
That's the big news.
Yeah.
I mean, right? The non-signing of the franchise tags, and D-Hop finally signed. I was a little surprised by this one. Like, I knew that they were rumored to be in the fold, but this is not where I thought D-Hop was going to end up.
Well, let's get into it and kick the player breakdown here. We got DeAndre Hopkins, newly added to the Tennessee Titans. He was wide receiver 47 last year, 64 receptions, 96 targets, 717 in yards, 3 touchdowns, an average of 10.7 targets per game. Thoughts on D-Hop?
Don't let the wide receiver ranking fool you, right? D-Hop missed the first 6 games of the regular 6. Is that right, Derek? 4.
I think it was 6.
Anyway, the first chunk, the first quarter plus of the regular season last year, came back and was a target monster yet again. So, I think there's a path for him to be in the back end of wide receiver 1 territory. And I'll be interested to see how it adapts, right? This is really the first time he's been in a true run first offense. And I am also a little interested to see how Tannehill does with him, right? Like, A.J. Brown did well with his year with Ryan Tannehill. So it's not that they can't feature a wide receiver 1, but that was a completely different offense, right? Different coordinator, different scheme, a younger offensive line. And so the hesitancy I have with D-Hop is not his ability as a player and as a wide receiver. It is the ability of the Texans to keep their the Titans to keep their quarterback upright. So, all in all, I expect him as 125, 130 targets. I think he's going to end up with, 102 catches, 103. Like, I think he just kind of gets over that. I think you'll see his touchdowns tick back up, probably 6 or 7, right? Like, I don't know that you're going to see like an all-pro season out of him just based off of how this Tennessee offense is going to be formulated. But I do think he's going to be a wide receiver 1. And at the back end of that, there's good value right now, right? Like, today was the last day for the value, right? If you're going to get Hopkins, this was the day to do it or before today was the day to do it, because now that there's a team assigned and you can actually put some focus into what that's going to look like, his draft stock is going to keep rising until we get to the start of the regular season. So I like D-Hop. I really like him as a second wide receiver on my team. It's going to be harder to do that between today and the start of the regular season. But nevertheless, if you're in a situation you can do that, that's a great way to start a team. If you're able to go 1-2 and get Cooper Kupp and DeAndre Hopkins or, something like that, and just kind of depending on how it falls out. So I think Tannehill can make it work, though. Like I do think that this will be able to work for Tennessee. He's going to be the first read. I mean, would you guys be surprised if his target share is anything less than 23%? I mean, in all reality, that's a monster target share. But would you be surprised if his target share was less than 23%? Because I think I would be.
Yes, there's 2 points I want to make here, and one of them is a question that I feel like is worth talking about. The first point is that Kevin, I think in a not to steal the phrase here, but in a fantasy world, I do think that what you're saying is true. In reality, though, I'm not so sure that he can command those numbers. Last year, the Titans wide receiver group had 2 100-yard receiving games. And
they were playing with scraps.
They were playing with scraps. I get that.
CU Boulder had better wide receivers than the Tennessee Titans.
And the O-line was questionable last year, and it was just a rough go there in Tennessee. And then obviously they did the experiment with, I can't even think of his name right now. What?
Julio.
Oh, there was that, but then there was the quarterback.
Robert Woods experiment. Was also there. Malik Willis.
Yeah, Malik Willis. Thank you. There was that, where obviously he's not going to get you, the passing numbers that you expect. So I don't know. I think that you need to temper your expectations, because there was decent receiver play there last year. This offense, runs through Derrick Henry, and that doesn't leave a lot for, receivers. I think you're right, Kevin. I think it would be a shock if he is targeted less than 23%. I think that is a very fair number and a great expectation for him. But I just don't know that, if you only throw the football, 25 times in a game, well, then what is that? If he gets a quarter of those and then he catches 60% of those, you're still
his catch rate's higher than that. Come on.
Okay. But with quarterbacks that would throw the football accurately.
So 7 receptions a game, right?
Sure.
I'll call it 6. 6 receptions a game.
Yeah. I'm not a math major.
That's enough to.
That'll get you there?
No, it gets you to about 75 or 80.
Yeah.
So It's a little bit lighter than what I thought, or than what I said off the top. But you're going to pass the ball more this year as a team anyway, because you don't have – if Tannehill stays healthy, you don't have Willis stepping in and trying to –
It's not Willis at all.
Do that, right? Like, Tannehill the ankle injury definitely was a bummer, but now there's actually – if people stay healthy, right? We like Chiggy. Everybody's talking about Chiggy, and we'll get to him here in a minute. But you have Chiggy. You have – Treylon Burks, you have DeAndre Hopkins now. Like, you have guys that it's either going to A, take pressure off the box for Derrick Henry, or B, it's going to give Tannehill some options, right? Because you can't just hone in here. Like, their receiving core in a year's time has really transformed, and it's going to keep defenses a little bit more honest, because they're not going to be able to constantly stack up, because even at his age, D-Hop can dominate one-on-one battles.
Hardly agree with that. Wholeheartedly. He's a cheat code out there.
So in that, I mean, I figure he's going to see it may not be 11 targets a game or just shy of like it was in Arizona, but if it's 9.5, right? Like if he loses a target per game but plays the whole season, you get there. You get to 100 receptions. You get to 6 touchdowns. And that's why I think this is all completely feasible. And they're not just wanting fantasy numbers. Like, I think that's just solid production for a back-end wide receiver 1.
So you are more bullish on him than I am. I don't know that I can get all the way up into wide receiver 1 for him. I think that we'll see him get into wide receiver 2 type of production this year. The reason I say that is even if he dominates 25% of the target share in Tennessee, you're realistically talking anywhere from 115 to 120 total targets out there, which he can do, right? But I see him probably getting to the point where 75 to 80 receptions. So I'm kind of right there in the same ballpark as you on that one. Call it around 950 or so as far as yardage, and probably about 6 touchdowns. And I think
his catch rate's only going to be 75%.
I think that there is going to be some of that, because I think you're going to see some bracket coverage on that one there. And part of the thing that we've always seen Tennessee do where the wide receiver breaks out, and why A.J. Brown was so successful in this one, and other wide receivers have had struggles in that deal, right? Regardless whether it was Julio or Robert Woods, who both of those I get were on the tail end of their careers there. Both of those guys, where it really came to be, and where A.J. Brown really was successful and succeeded on that, was the play action pass, where they bit on it and it was up and over the top, and he would get it and then break away, and he'd turn what should have been maybe about a 5 to 8 yard reception into a 50, 60 yard touchdown type of scoring drive on that one. So I think that, we were talking a little bit before, I think that the D-Hop there certainly takes a lot of the pressure off of Treylon Burks, and we may see him with some of those touchdown shots there. But I don't see the D-Hop is going to be that guy that breaks it up over the top of that thing. So I just don't think that we're going to see him get to a full-on wide receiver 1, but I think he can get into upper end wide receiver 2, mid-tier type of wide receiver 2. So we're not that far apart on some of these things, but I think that probably wide receiver 15, 16, 8 to 18 is probably more where I see him playing.
So does this signing then extend the leash on Ryan Tannehill or make it shorter?
His contract is going to be what does him in Tennessee, right? Like his cap hit is extremely high.
I'm just saying for this year, because he's there for this year.
Yeah.
Does it keep his leash longer?
Yeah. And there haven't been positive reports about Will Levis or Malik Willis coming out of Tennessee.
Sure.
Like, those guys are miles behind Ryan Tannehill, and Will Levis is a decent bit behind Malik Willis if you're believing what the beat writers are seeing and writing about in Tennessee anyway. So I don't feel like there's any competition for Ryan Tannehill at this point. Like, he's essentially in Daniel Jones mode, where he's trying to absolutely ball out and justify keeping him around for next year. Like, his job this year is completely safe. He's playing for his job next year.
Right.
And if you go out and you're efficient, right? If he can complete 69% of his passes, if he can throw for 22 touchdown passes and only have 10 interceptions, and if he can rush and scramble for 350 to 400 yards, you add another 2 touchdowns in just because he is still athletic enough to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I think he does that, right? Like, Tennessee's goal is to get back to the playoffs, right? We have not necessarily anointed Jacksonville the division winner, but we have definitely said that they're the leader in the clubhouse before the season even kicks off. We all love Jacksonville. Well, Tennessee, even with crappy, I say crappy quarterback play last year, but with the dinged up Tannehill and Malik Willis, they were a game away. Like, it's not that Tennessee was miles away from the playoffs. They had Malik Willis play in 3 and start 2 games, or play whatever it was.
There was more Malik Willis than I think they would have hoped.
Oh, absolutely. But you don't think they win 2 of those games with Tannehill? Like, and then they're back in the playoffs. Like, he's a playoff guy. I don't know that he's going to win you a Super Bowl, but I don't know that they have a quarterback on their roster who's going to win a Super Bowl. But if you can get to the playoffs and keep the fan base energized and keep them coming back and wanting more, it's a heck of a lot easier to say, hey, we're going to tweak than, hey, we're going to blow up and rebuild.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah, I can get down on that for sure. Real quick before we get into the Bengals here, a question coming in on the YouTubes. We're going to hit that one up here. Hunter over on YouTube. Welcome into the channel, Hunter. He says, my team is Josh Allen, Saquon Pollard, Debo, Keenan Allen, Waller, Bass, Steelers defense, A.J. Dillon, Jahan Dotson, Antonio Gibson, JSN, Pickens, and Dalton Schultz. He has an open bench spots. Looks like a full PPR redraft. What should he do with the open slot there? You could get a backup QB, Renfro, Parker, Shepard, Lazard, Nico Collins are all available. Algier, Jeff Wilson, Jalen Warren, don't want Donta Foreman, Chuba Hubbard, and many more backup running backs there. So what would you be your advice for Hunter here?
So before you get some real advice from my co-host, I will tell you the play that I make. You have, in my opinion, you have a great team so far. And unfortunately, in fantasy football, you can't play defense against the other team that you're playing, right? Like there's no way to stop a good team that you're going up against, except if you make sure that they don't have good players on their roster because you've stashed them away on your roster. So I would lean towards I think getting a backup quarterback for inevitably the bye week, but B, to try and limit the options for the rest of the league mates that you have in terms of what they can do at the quarterback position. So that's where I lean. I don't know that is necessarily the best piece of advice, as Derek and Kevin shake their heads no. But that is the route that I take, says the guy who's won one fantasy championship in 15 years of play.
I tell you what, I'll go, and Kevin, you round this thing off and tell me how I do here. So looking at your roster and what you've got here, honestly, I would be looking to pick up Matt Breida or Eric Gray, and probably leaning on the Matt Breida side of things until we figure out what's going on with Saquon and this contract. Because right now he didn't sign his tender. They're not expected to show up for training camp here, and both he and Josh Jacobs are under. This isn't one of those that. In the past, we've seen guys where they have to finally report to camp because they, start getting dinged and fined and all of that. Neither one of them signed their franchise tender, so neither one of them are going to be getting dinged with fines, anything like that. If they fail to show up to training camp, all of that. And there's a point too that, even if they show up late to training camp, and Kevin gave me this, we were talking about this the other day and was talking a little bit about the fact that, it takes some time to get back, to get the hits and get the reps and all of that and really get into full on football shape, and missing training camp can play into that a little bit. So if I'm looking to do that, I'm going to take the shot on probably Matt Breida, Eric Gray, until I figure out what's going on with the Saquon contract. And is he going to be really ready to roll out week 1 for you?
So, man, he's going to get 3 different options. I like Derek's option as the second round. First round, here's what I'm doing. I'm picking up Tyler Algier, and I'm packaging him and Debo to whoever has Bijan Robinson, and I want a better receiver than Debo. Like that's what I'm doing. Like I'm giving everyone, give you your handcuff for your prized rookie running back who you have no idea what's actually going to happen. So here's your backup, and here's Deebo Samuel, and all I want in return is someone better than Deebo. Like just depending on what his roster looks like, right? Like Chris Olave. Yeah. Chris Olave. Jalen Waddle if they have it. Devonta Smith. I'd rather have that over Deebo. Like upgrade there. That's where you need to upgrade right now, right? Like you took quarterback early, that's just fine. You got Josh Allen. You took your shot on running back, which is great. You have Saquon. You now need to make up for it in receiver, and that's how you do it. Now, if you're able to get this accomplished, then you go back through because now you have 2, and then you still have 1 open roster spot, and then you go back through and you pick up Breida or Gray and handcuff your Saquon pick in case he doesn't report because they can't come to a amicable resolution and have him sign that contract and get in there and start participating in OTAs with the team and preseason and everything else. So I like what Derek said. There's nothing wrong with that. I would use that as the part B of my option. And part A, I would try and upgrade receiver. And the best way I see to do that without seeing anything else in your league is grab Tyler Algier, pair him with Debo, and try and ship them off to the team that has Bijan for, a better wide receiver option.
Yeah, actually, Kevin, you talked me into it. I like let's go 1A on yours. I like that a lot better. And actually, I said that it would leave one player roster spot open. We can that trade. You were right originally when you said 2, because you're doing a 2-for-1 type of package deal on what you're talking about. So at that point, you could do that. And you could add both Matt Breida and Eric Gray, and just see how that really comes out. And you know which way the Giants are going to lean. Should Saquon not be there week 1?
Yeah,
and you've got
funky.
Yeah,
it looks funky for the first couple weeks, but as the season goes on, you'll be able to drop them, right? Like you'll be able to navigate through that. We're not saying you're going to keep them on your roster forever. Right. It's just how can you improve the most in the shortest amount of time? It's upgrade your wide receiver position, and the fastest way I can see to do that, based off your roster construction, is pick on the Bijan owner, like how he let Tyler Algier through the entire draft. Like that person clearly is not paying attention to the needs of their roster and what's going on. So see if you can pick on them a little bit. Good luck.
Right. I like that one. So there you go, Hunter. Kind of roster doctored that a little bit for you. All right. Heat Life real quick. What are your thoughts on Khalil Herbert? Heat Life, we hit up the Khalil Herbert one, right back at the very beginning when we started that. So we've got those out there. We'll be getting a lot of these breakdowns up for like the full breakdown, but real quick, the consensus on that was that Khalil Herbert isn't the Bears running back that any of us was wanting to roster ahead of the other ones. Did I summation that pretty well?
Yeah. Justin Fields is number 1. Donta Foreman's number 2. Khalil Herbert's 2B or even number 3.
Right.
And there's a chance that Roschon Johnson's going to end up usurping Khalil Herbert by the time the season's over anyway. So I am not a believer in Herbert, and I am passing him consistently. I actually don't think I have any pieces of Khalil Herbert across the 17 drafts I've done, whether it's dynasty, redraft, or best ball.
Fair enough. All righty, let's get into the Cincinnati Bengals. 12-4 last year, 60% pass, 40% run, 8th in points for, 15th in yards for. Head coach Zach Taylor, offensive coordinator Brian Callahan. We're going to head to the running back room. Start there where we always did. Joe Mixon on a restructured deal coming back this season. Joe Mixon finished RB12 last year. 212 rush attempts, 826 yards, 7 touchdowns, 60 receptions, 75 targets, 441 yards, 2 touchdowns. Thoughts on Joe Mixon?
I would like for his rushing efficiency to go up. Now, I like the receptions. Don't get me wrong. I like the 60 receptions, and I think that's probably a number that you're most likely going to see again, barring legal situations and blah blah blah. So the value for Joe Mixon right now is very good, right? Like the legal thing came out, Mixon was sliding, 4th, even the 5th round at times. That's kind of sprung, like he hit his floor and kind of bounced up a little bit. So now you're seeing him creep back up as far as ADP goes. So I like him as a number 2 back. I think he has number 1 upside, depending on the receptions, if he can get in the end zone a little bit more. Really where he was a little disappointing in the red zone last year. Just really wasn't able to punch it in. And now that Samaje is gone, I think that leads to some extra opportunities for him there. So the mix of the offense, I think you stay the same, right? I think it's still 60% pass and 40% run, right? So you're not going to you may not see the total volume out of Joe Mixon that you see out of like a Derrick Henry, where it's more like 53 pass and 47 run, much more close to balanced. But I do think that because there's no real competition for touches, that leads to a lot of opportunities for Joe Mixon. And with where he's going in drafts, being able to pick him up as your second running back in a lot of different cases leads towards a lot of good upside, because he's better than being drafted the 16th, 17th running back in some cases. He's better than that. So you have built-in value with Joe Mixon. I like him a lot. I had him on my home team last year. I have different pieces of Joe Mixon kind of sprinkled around in my different leagues here at the moment. And I think that he could be a very solid piece to your fantasy roster, depending on how you're fluctuating. And honestly, he's a 0 RB candidate, right? If you go wide receiver, you can still pick Mixon up in the third. And that's not terrible, because then you can go Mixon and you can pair him with Miles Sanders, right? So you can do something like that. Or if you're in a league that's really hating on him, there's a possibility you could grab Stevenson in the top of the third, and then maybe, just maybe, grab Mixon in the fourth. Now, I think that was probably about 3 weeks ago where you could legitimately pull that off. As I said, he's continuing to jump up as far as the ADP goes, but don't discredit him too much. It doesn't sound like there's going to be a whole lot going on the legal side of things, but we'll know more as we get closer. And if he does get popped for a game or two, his ADP will fall back down, and then you can capitalize on it, picking him up around 6 or 7.
I think the biggest thing that I take away from your point there, Kevin, is that he is a piece, right? He is not somebody you want to hang your fantasy hat on, because realistically, last year you look at what he did, save for one game. It was kind of a meh season for Joe Mixon, and I know you can't just subtract one game out of there, but I mean, there was one game where he had 153 yards and 4 touchdowns, and aside from that, the rest of the season he had 3 touchdowns, right? And he never got over 100 yards again, so you weren't getting those 100-yard bonus points. And again, that was kind of a product of the offense. He wasn't getting a ton of carries, a ton of 20 carry games. He only had 2 of those. He's more in that 10 to teens range, right? Like he's above 10, but less than 20. That's kind of where Joe Mixon lives. And I think that's kind of where they would like him to live. His passing productivity is great. As a PPR, in a PPR league, that's a really nice piece to get there. But realistically, I think that's how you have to look at him. If you do go that 0 RB route, Mixon is a good candidate there, but you got to make sure that you've got some sort of fallback on it, because you hope that he gets one of those games again. But that was 1 week, and yes, the consistency of 10 carries and 50, 60 yards. And then, throw in 4 or 5 catches for another, 20 or 30 yards. That's about what you're going to get out of him on a consistent basis. And you hope that you have him in your lineup the week that he pops. But he is a piece and not a build your roster. I know this sounds kind of silly, but not build your roster around him, but complement the pieces of your roster that you have with a Joe Mixon.
Yeah. And this is one of those that there wasn't a ton of things done on that offensive line that lead me to believe that we are going to see a more efficient Joe Mixon on the ground. PPR style though, and half point PPR, that's where he's going to get those points and bring it home that way for you, right? Like this is a guy that still went out and got over 1,200 from the line of scrimmage type of yards for you. So he was very productive overall for you. Still a guy, even in half point PPR scoring, put up over 200 total points for you. And that's what you want out of a running back that you can certainly get as a running back 2 for your roster there. There is some of those things that I think he will continue to climb up the board. Right now, I would say that he's probably a value, and there's some of that, potential risk baked in to where he's being drafted. But when things come around towards, when we get fully into redraft season and out of that, I fully expect his ranking or his ADP to climb to the point where, this is probably you're going to be getting about what you draft there on that one. So it wouldn't surprise me that, as we get towards the tail end of August, type of thing, that we see him get up there in a third to, even potentially second round type of ADP.
Kevin, you had him in the home league. Do you remember that week that he went off against Seattle?
I do. I do.
It was probably a nice week for you.
Honestly, I needed every bit of that. Like I scraped by that week because whoever I was playing against had someone else who had it was a wide receiver who had a phenomenal week.
Crazy.
Like
That's funny.
Honestly, it might have been Cooper Kupp, like before he got injured or something like that. That they had a phenomenal week, and it basically wiped out what Joe Mixon did. And I was like, well, crap. Like
you get a 4-touchdown, 153-yard, 4-touchdown performance, and you need every bit of it. That should be a comfortable win.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the morning slate, I felt really good about it. And then by the afternoon slate, it was basically neck and neck. I went, what in the world happened? So, yeah, I remember that week because it was a sweat. Like, I thought it was going to coast for the morning game. And then by the time Sunday Night Football came out, like, I was sweating out that win. Like, it was tough.
Oh, it was Carolina. Did I say Seattle earlier? It was against Carolina. That's my mistake if I said Seattle earlier. That's very funny. Derek, are you feverishly looking up who he was playing that week? Okay, we'll do the game again.
It was the Devontae Adams performance in week 9, where he went 10 on 17 targets for 146, 2 touchdowns. Like that one certainly propelled that quite a bit for him.
That's one. Oh, he double tapped.
Yeah, double tapped it. One of those touchdowns was like a 50+ yarder, wasn't it?
Yeah, like one of them. And one of them was a very long touchdown.
Yeah, I remember. Yes. So
I take that back. He had 5 total touchdowns in that game. Mixon did. He also caught one through the air. Man, what a game!
He should have had a 6 too, but he dropped it.
Mm-hmm.
What a game!
Alrighty.
Yes. I seem to have much more interesting these damn Raiders, man.
They get you. They'll get you.
these damn Raiders.
If it ain't Darren Waller, it's somebody else.
No clue, right? Like holy smokes.
Alrighty. Let's hit into Chase Brown, rookie, drafted round 5, pick 163 out of Illinois. Thoughts on Chase Brown?
I have a ton of Chase Brown in dynasty leagues. A absolute ton. So we're going to see what pans out. I mean, I am heavily believing in the fact that what he did at Illinois, I think he kind of stands out as the closest thing to Joe Mixon that the Bengals have on the roster. Trayvon Williams and I believe they have someone else on there too that I should know, but I don't. So there's no guarantee with Chase Brown. I can't even tell you that he's the true handcuff, right? Like I can tell you that I like him in Dynasty. I can tell you that I'm keeping an eye on him. Like I am actively paying attention to see how it goes for camp and through training camp and kind of see what the beat writers have to say about it, what their thoughts and opinions are with playing time and how the coaches are talking about him, that type of thing. So as we get closer to the season, I'll probably have my finger on the pulse a little bit more. But right now, it's just kind of going through the motions, and he's just the guy that at the moment I like the best outside of Joe Mixon. So if I had to pick a handcuff for him, it would be Brown. But like I said, a month from now, when we have another 4 weeks worth of information and everything else, I reserve the right to change my opinion on a handcuff. But if I don't have Mixon, I'm not drafting Brown unless it's like a silly deep league. So I guess buyer beware. If I have Mixon, I don't want to lose out on that. But truthfully, if Mixon sits, it's probably RBBC in Cincinnati, right? Then you're going to see something like a 65-35 pass to run ratio. Like Joe Burrow is just going to put the team on his back and say, hey, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Irv Smith Jr. Like, hey, let's go win a couple weeks while our boy's out, and we'll figure this out later.
Yeah, that's kind of how I see it too. It's already a pass heavy offense, and if you subtract the one known commodity, then I think it tilts even more that direction. So yeah, I think in Dynasty that's a very good call. Stash, figure out what this Mixon situation is. Will they keep him after this year? because you'll set yourself up. Look, the Bengals are a good team, and I think they're going to be a good team for a while. As long as Joe Burrow is quarterbacking that team, I think they've set themselves up very nicely. But that does kind of hurt the running back position because Joe Burrow is going to use his right arm to get them where they need to go. So I think Brown is the long game. Mixon is the immediate game, but I'm not so sure that, if I don't, just like you were saying, Kevin, if I don't have Mixon, then there's no need for me to have Brown on my roster taking up a spot.
Yeah, I concur. Nothing else to add. You guys have hit that one very well. I concur.
Perfect.
All right. Jamar Chase was, man, I gotta get after this guy that does. No, that's right. Jamar Chase, wide receiver 12 last year, 87 receptions, 134 targets, 1,046 in the yardage, 9 touchdowns, an average of 10.3 targets per game. Thoughts on Jamar Chase?
I'd like to see his efficiency improve just a little bit, right? I love the 134 targets, but I'd like to see him at like 110 catches, right? And maybe that's a little bit too much, but even at, 102 targets or 102 catches on 134 targets, 145 maybe this year, who knows? But I think the sky's the limit. Jamar Chase is a popular pick to be the number 1 overall wide receiver in fantasy this year, right? Much like we saw the Justin Jefferson breakout coming. A lot of people think that this is going to be Jamar Chase's year to do that. I've leaned that way for a little while, and I think I'm stepping back from that just a little bit. Like, I just think that having such a dynamic companion in T. Higgins and serviceable number 3 in Boyd, I think that makes it really hard for Jamar Chase to finish as the number 1 overall wide receiver in fantasy. So I think he's top 5. Like, I think we see improvement on these numbers. I think the touchdowns stay the same. I mean, they're hard to project, but it wouldn't surprise me if he got up to 12, right? And I think that's kind of his path to jump from wide receiver 12 up to wide receiver 5 is add 3 more touchdowns. And then it's efficiencies and yardage. Like, can we get him up to 1,200 yards receiving instead of just over 1,000? Can we get him to 100 catches instead of, the mid 80s? Like, all those little bits and pieces and points get him inside that top 5, which is where I do expect him to be. He's clearly being drafted as the number 2 wide receiver off the board. So it makes your ceiling really thin, right? Like, you can't really get better than number 2 overall, and it leaves a whole lot of room for disappointment. But I understand the allure. It's in a big-time passing offense. He's a young, dynamic player. Him and Joe Burrow have a chemistry. He's coming into kind of that year 3 breakout era that wide receivers typically hit as a lot of times their career best numbers. So all the things are there. I'd like to see him do a little bit better on contested catches, and I'd like to see him a little bit more efficient on, just his overall catch rate. Part of that is Burrow's fault for just kind of forcing the ball in there when he doesn't have anything else. And part of it's on Chase for, I won't say alligator arms, but maybe breaking off a route just a little bit too short, right? Like, just trying and be a half step quicker than what he really needs to be. And I think it cost him some catches there. But overall, he's a great player. He's fun to have on your roster. I don't blame anybody sitting at the 2 hole. You sit there, and if it's a single quarterback league, you're debating between Chase and Christian McCaffrey, right? Like, I'm not going to fault anybody for going either way. So I get it. But he does not have being drafted at 2 overall when he hasn't really shown that yet, right? Because even Jefferson went at the 6th receiver overall last year for ADP and then finished number 1. Like, Chase's room for error is very minimal. But he's a hell of a fun player to watch, guys. Like, he just is. So I'm not going to fault anybody for it. I hope he gets there. I wish I had more of him in different leagues. I only have, two or three pieces of Jamar Chase, but man, oh man, is he a hell of a lot of fun to watch.
I tell you what is surprising is that he basically matched his rookie year. This past year, he basically matched his rookie year in terms of receptions. He had more receptions. He had more targets. He had 4 fewer touchdowns and was 400 fewer yards. But here's where it gets fun, and I think why a lot of people are projecting him out to be that number 1 or number 2 wide receiver. He did all of that in 12 games. He missed the entire month of November, right? So, if you factor in the fact that he plays a full 17 games, which you can never predict injuries, you can never predict, missing time for anything. But if you stat out those numbers over the course of a full season, like what an insane year that would have been for him. He would have been flirting with 1,700 yards almost, you'd have to think, right? Like that's not all that out of the question. And certainly that touchdown number would have gone up. Yeah, he had 9 and 12, so that puts you up at what, like 13 or 14 and 17 games, something if you stat that out that way. So that would have been just one for the ages last year, and really would have pushed Justin Jefferson for that number 1 spot. So I think that's where the hype is coming. Yes, the numbers do need to go up. We do need to see him be in there for a full season, which he did his rookie year, but again missed time last year in his sophomore season. So I get what you're saying, Kevin, with there's a razor thin margin. You draft him that high, he has to perform that high. Otherwise you are, drafting a lemon, as it were, it's an upside down proposition. So I think it's possible if everybody stays healthy, and you have to go in with that ultimate belief that everybody's going to stay healthy when you're drafting these guys, that he could absolutely throw out a bonkers, like a season for the history books, if he stays healthy, because what he did over 12 games was incredible. And if he could play a full 17, then holy crap.
Yeah, Jamar Chase will produce very well for you. Newsflash, he's really good at football, right? Like when it's all said and done, I think where I'm going to see him kind of statted out is probably somewhere in about the 110 to 115 receptions. We probably see him flirt in the 14 to 1,500 yard range. And I think we probably see around 10 touchdowns. So like he's going to have a very, very good number. Now, where I just kind of projected all of that, that's mid wide receiver
and Derek,
1 territory. That's not.
I think those are conservative numbers, though.
Like
in my opinion, I think those are conservative numbers over, what he is capable of. And I think that's kind of, I would see that if he is healthy for the whole season, I would see that as his floor. So there's your floor.
Yeah.
Wide receiver 1 territory.
Right. And where he ended up playing last year, right? He was also 6th in points per game at the wide receiver position, right? So kind of breaking that down and putting it a little bit more in that kind of range there. So he will do well for your fantasy team. He's going to be a ton of fun to watch on that one. But the point you guys have both made already is that the margin is razor thin on this one. And if he doesn't finish as wide receiver 1 or 2, you may have made a faux pas in your draft night room when you were looking at this thing, when there's guys going behind him that will probably produce right in that same range, and Cooper Kupp, Tyreek Hill, like there's chances that those guys finish as good or better, and at which point, right, like you may have slightly overspent. But this is one of those that if you want him on your roster, he's going to have to be your first round pick. And fun guy to root for. So I'd take my shot on him. I wouldn't have an issue on that one. All right, let's go ahead and head over to T. Higgins, who finished wide receiver 31 last year, 75 receptions, 110 targets, 1,042 in the yardage, 7 touchdowns, 7.3 targets per game. Thoughts on T. Higgins?
I want to like T. Higgins, but man, if you get ghosted 2 games like you did last year, right? Where, we think he's going to, what's a calf injury or something like that? We think he's going to play. He shoots up and doesn't play a snap. Like, T. Higgins cost people games last year. Like, I get it. It's frustrating as a fantasy owner. Sportsmanship, gamesmanship, I think, is more or less what it is, right? From the Bengals, or if the doctors truly pulled him back and said, let's hold out a week. So there's plenty of room for improvement on T. Higgins. He's a great number 2 option, right? He's a great number 2 option. So he is a guy that if you go running back in the first round, right? You ideally want to pair that up with something like a Jalen Waddle and T. Higgins, right? Like, something like that combination if you can. So I expect these numbers to continue to improve slightly. I am expecting a full slate of games out of T. Higgins. I think that the touchdowns are probably about right. Somewhere in that 7 or 8 touchdown range. He's a dynamic player. He's a great complement to Jamar Chase. And he's a guy that I don't have a problem rostering, right? Whether it's my second wide receiver, or if you're going really wide receiver heavy and you kind of get the right fall or lay of the land, if you can get him as your third wide receiver, because that's how you're just starting your draft and you're hammering that out. Like, that is dynamic in wide receiver heavy leagues. So he's a good route runner. He's got good hands. He's been able to improve kind of his release and get a little bit better separation than what he was originally kind of anticipated for coming out of Clemson. And the kid's a baller, right? He's just a baller. And we would be talking about him as a top 12 guy if he wasn't playing alongside of a top 5 guy. Like, it's just one of those things. Now, this offense can support 2 top 12 wide receivers. It just can. So there's a little bit of room for improvement, but based off, I'm fudging here because I did not have this pulled up, and I apologize. But his average, where's he going? D, tell us.
Wide receiver 13, 27 overall.
So I think that's about right. Like, if he falls, if he ends up as wide receiver 16, you're not overly surprised, right? You wish you would have done better. But the same thing, if you draft him at 13 and he ends up at 10, again, you're not overly surprised. That's why you drafted him, because he's had a high upside on a pass-heavy offense and this, that, and the other. So I think he has a window there where you have acceptable outcomes from T. Higgins. And again, another fun player to watch because of the passing attack that Cincinnati has to offer. So great compliment. I like him a lot. So I have no problem smashing the yes button on T. Higgins as you're building out your roster.
Yeah, good. Hopefully second wide receiver option for you. I think, if you're building your roster and you get, say, somebody up there in that, top 8 or 9, and then you can hope that T. Higgins comes back around to you in that 3rd, 4th round area, right? That's not bad. I think he's a solid wide receiver too, and I mean a solid wide receiver too. Probably one of the best wide receiver twos you can get out there.
Yeah, T. Higgins will do well for fantasy, right? Wide receiver 13, though, where you have to kind of draft him, that seems like you're kind of drafting him at his ceiling for me. There's right. You could see him sneak up there into wide receiver 1 territory, but there's guys going after him at the wide receiver position that I would rather take my shot on. Chris Olave going to pick right after him. I'd rather take my shot there. I'd rather take my shot on, Najee going behind him as well. Potentially even would rather have the Keenan Allen, Amari Cooper, Calvin Ridley routes on my roster, more so than T. Higgins there. He's a fun guy to watch. He's a fun guy to perform, and a fun guy to have on your roster. Just this feels like I'm going to draft him at his ceiling, and there's other options that I think I can get probably some better value for that pick on that one, and that would be the route that I would roll. All right, Tyler Boyd, who was wide receiver 30 last year, 59 receptions, 83 targets, 776 yards, 6 touchdowns, an average of 4.9 targets per game. Thoughts on Tyler Boyd?
Pass. His target share has gone down each of the last 2 years as Justin Jefferson and T. Higgins become more prevalent as pros and all-stars
Jamar
for
Chase.
this team. I'm sorry. Yes, Jamar Chase. My apologies.
I got you.
So Tyler Boyd's a guy I'm not interested in. I'd rather pivot, I guess, a little bit and look at some different options and see what I can get there. Yes, it's nice. He is a low-end wide receiver too if one of these guys goes down with injury, but as long as all 3 of these wide receivers are healthy, Tyler Boyd is nothing more than just a bench warmer or bye week fill in off the waiver wire.
Yeah, he's kind of in that meh area too in the ADP. So, I mean, you're throwing darts at that point. I mean, with the guys that are going around him, it's kind of a dart throw. So, I mean, really, there's Kendre Miller going just in front of him. Juwan Johnson is going just after him. Donovan Peoples-Jones is down there as well. So, like, you're kind of throwing a dart anyways. I think it is an okay dart to throw because he is playing on a pass-happy offense, but you do have to weigh into the fact that there are 2 alphas, kind of an alpha and a secondary nice piece that are going to just really eat into his target share. So it's tough.
So, Alex, you might be throwing darts in that range. I'm drafting my first tight end. That's how I'm playing that one in that deal. So
that's a good strategy to employ.
Right. So where's coming off the board, right? 55th wide receiver, 130th overall. Now, like I will look tight end there, right? Greg Dulcich coming off the board, 131, like a pick right behind him. Tyler Higbee, Cole Kmet. You mentioned Juwan Johnson. I think I'd rather go with any one of those tight ends there. And I'd be very happy with how my roster was constructed at that point. So no, Tyler Boyd is a bye week fill-in stream if I need him type of thing, but I'm not looking to add him onto my roster in the draft. Irv Smith was tight end 46 last year, 25 receptions, 36 targets, 182 yards, 0 touchdowns, an average of 4.5 targets per game. Thoughts on Irv Smith?
I'm not looking to draft Irv Smith. I think that Cincinnati's going to fall in love with the way he blocks. Yes. He will be able to get out in routes. Yes, we will see him. His rankings will improve. Like, he could finish as tight end 18, right? Like, and there's nothing wrong with finishing tight end 18. Best ball league, yeah, maybe you take a flyer on him to capitalize that 1 or 2 weeks that he's going to kind of really pop for you. But he's a hell of a blocker, and he's a great receiver out of Alabama, but he's a hell of a blocker, and that is what teams have found with him, right? Like, it's hard to get him out in passing concepts because he plays on the line of scrimmage so well. And if Cincinnati is looking to be more efficient out of the run game, he's probably going to stay in line a little bit more than what is anticipated. And quite frankly, he might be the best blocking tight end they've had in the last decade. I'd have to go back through and kind of stat that. It's kind of a quick hot take off the cuff comment, but there's nothing wrong with Irv Smith. But he is a tight end 2, like maybe a tight end 3. Like by the time it's all, maybe not tight end 3, but a tight end 2 when it's all said and done with. So he's not getting drafted in most leagues. You play the waiver wire. If the matchup is great, if Higgins or Chase go down, then yeah, maybe you take a flyer on him because those targets have to go somewhere and they spread the ball out a little bit more. But on a consistent weekly basis, Irv Smith Jr. is not the guy for you.
I'll add to that point that you made there. Last year the Bengals had Hayden Hurst as like their, primary receiving option as a tight end. And he still only came down with 2 touchdowns on a very touchdown dependent position. Right. And he only had 400 yards receiving on 52 catches. I think that Hayden Hurst is probably a better pass catcher than Irv Smith, a better route runner, certainly not the blocker that Irv Smith is. And so you factor that in, that Hayden Hurst as the tight end position put up kind of ho-hum numbers. Irv Smith, a better blocker, is like, that's the ceiling, is those ho-hum numbers. So like, that's kind of how you have to, how I look at it, at least, is that Irv Smith, a better blocker, not as great as a pass catcher as Hayden Hurst, and still Hayden Hurst didn't have that great of a statistical year last year.
Yeah, I'm going to be out on Irv Smith on the redraft. Although Hayden Hurst, pretty good blocker in his own right, just Irv Smith better than, right? Like I take
right.
So,
Yeah.
Just wanted to make sure that I gave Hayden Hurst his due credit on being a good blocker.
I thought this was the Hayden Hurst hater podcast. Is that not where we are here? I'm sorry.
No, it's a love fest, man. It's a love fest.
No, I like Hayden, but that's kind of been his problem too. Like you want him to be your receiving tight end, and then you see the guy block and go, man, we got to keep him in line. But holy crap, we've paid all this money for him to catch the ball, and he's not catching passes. Like,
not doing it.
Here, we're going to trade him again. Or here, we're not going to be able to keep him around because he just doesn't fit the bill. Like, honestly, Hayden Hurst would be great in New England. In New England.
Oh, yeah.
So maybe 2 years from now, who knows?
There you go. All righty. Joe Burrow, who finished QB4, 418 completions, 610 attempts, a 68.5 completion percentage, 4,527 yards, 36 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. Not sure what happened there.
Gremlins.
Anyway, I'm starting over. Joe Burrow, QB4, 418 completions, 610 attempts, 68.5% completion, 4,527 yards, 36 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, 76 rushes for 259 yards, and 5 tutties on the ground. Thoughts on Joe Burrow?
Smash yes. Like, I have no problem having him in. I think he's consistently in the top 4 now, right? I think it's Mahomes and Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts and Joe Burrow. Like, and some people mix them up a little bit, right? Like, Hurts is one because of his rushing ability. No, it's Mahomes. No, it's Allen. Like, Burrow. Like, I have no problem taking Burrow and missing out on those top 3 guys who kind of go a little bit earlier, and just taking that next. I don't even know if it's a true half step down, but I have no problem with having Joe Burrow on my team. I like him more than Lamar Jackson. I like him more than
Fields, Herbert,
Fields and Herbert. Yes, Fields and Herbert. So to me, he's clearly inside that top 4. Wherever you want to place him, you go for it. But I expect more of the same. Like, those numbers, I think you could see very, very similar numbers to that this year, possibly a little bit better if he increases the completion percentage, right? Like, if he goes from 68.5 to 69.5, you're going to see some more completions out of it. I think he could flirt with 5,000 yards based off of how this offense is kind of run in their breakdown between pass and run. And you could see 40 touchdowns out of him, right? Like, if Jamar Chase isn't injured for the month of November,
yep,
does Joe Burrow get to 40 touchdown passes? And you're still going to get a couple on the ground. It may not be 5 again, but I think you could get 2 or 3. So some of that might balance out slightly depending on how your league scoring is, but smash yes. Dude has a great arm. He's a great leader. People rally around him. This Bengals team is in win now mode, and they are a pass happy team. So yes.
could not agree more. There are very few no-brainers. This is one of them.
Yeah. Dude's good at football. So,
not exactly what you want when we're, making these YouTube videos and whatnot, but that is exactly what you need.
If you're going to draft quarterback early, that is where my tier break is, essentially. Like, it is those four guys.
After,
I'm going to go Joe Burrow, and right there's that break. I don't want Lamar Jackson. I like Justin Fields, but I don't like having to pay up like that for Justin Fields. Herbert, I like, but he hasn't been able to really put it all together. So if it's not Joe Burrow, I want to wait till Trevor Lawrence, and then Trevor Lawrence, Deshaun Watson, Tua. That range is where I'm looking for next. So you got the top four, then I'm missing like the next six, and then I'm back in for like the next three guys. Or miss the next five, and then I'm in for the next 3 or 4 guys. Like, right. That's kind of where that is. Like, I don't want that tier 2 guy. Yeah. Like, I want tier 1 with those 4 guys. I will skip out on this, what I'm going to call tier 2 for now, until I dive into my tier rankings. And then the back end of tier 2, I guess I will put Lawrence in there, and that's where I want back in. Lawrence, Watson, Tua, if he can stay healthy, and the efficiencies that he has. So it does kind of vary there. And that's where I'll be picky at quarterback. Like, if my guy's gone, I will wait another round, knowing that, these 6-7 teams already have quarterbacks. I will take my chances and let's see what falls to me and kind of go from there. But I'm not going to force myself into Lamar Jackson because I want a top tier quarterback. I'm not going to do that. I would rather wait 2 rounds and take Tua and get that discount and get skill position players around him to help supplement my fantasy roster. And if I have to take a second quarterback a little bit sooner and I pair him up with Russ Wilson or Aaron Rodgers or Jared Goff, I mean, I'd pair any one of these guys up with Jared Goff and I'd feel great and just kind of call it good. Now, Goff's probably going a little bit sooner, but even a Derek Carr, right? Maybe that's what I should be saying. Draft these guys, and then you wait until around 13 or 14, and you draft Derek Carr as your second quarterback, if that's what you want to do, or if your guy has a little bit of risk, whether it's a running quarterback or, injury history, kind of like Tua, and go from that route. So from a draft approach, that's where the break is. Joe Burrow fits the bill. The next few guys after him, I want them at my number. I don't want to take those guys in the 4th round. I want to take them in the 6th round, and I'd feel better about that.
Yeah. And right now, Joe Burrow, you got to take him as QB4, kind of in that middle of the 3rd round is kind of where he's coming off the board there. For me, that's a little bit rich on what I like doing and how I like constructing rosters, to take a QB that early. But I'm right there with you, Kevin, is if I'm going to spend up on a quarterback, I'm going to go with the same 4 guys you mentioned, right? Mahomes, Allen, Hurts, Burrow. And then I'm going to wait. And I'm going to wait all the way down until you get into the Tua, the Dak type of range, where you're typically talking like the 90th to 100th pick type of thing there. You're talking late into the 9th round type of deal. And so there's a big difference. And a lot of things that I can do there, but I'm not looking to necessarily spend up on it. Joe Burrow is the guy that I would potentially spend up to do that, just because of the fact that I don't have to spend a top 2 round pick on him. I'd rather go out and I'd rather get my top tier wide receiver, top tier running back, or do a double up on running back, double up on wide receiver type of thing there, and really kind of build and solidify that base out there of that roster construction. And if I'm not going to go Joe Burrow on that 3rd round, I'm going to kick that can down the road, so to speak, until that 8th, 9th round range and start looking at some other guys there. So I like it. Great concept there. All right, let's go ahead and hit up before I do that, any other thoughts on Burrow or the Bengals?
No, fun fantasy team you want a piece of.
Absolutely. Let's hit up the Vikings then. 13-4 last year, 63% pass, 37% rush, ranked 7th in both points and yards for Kevin O'Connell, the head coach, Wes Phillips, the offensive coordinator. Running back room is going to look very different this year in Minnesota than it has in years past. Alexander Mattison, RB1 right now for them. He finished as RB 49 last year, 74 rush attempts, 283 yards, 5 touchdowns, 15 receptions, 18 targets, 91 yards and 1 touchdown. Thoughts on Alexander Mattison?
He's a lesser version of Dalvin Cook. He's not as dynamic. His hands aren't as good. You still have the injury questions and durability questions, I guess, if you will. You're on a team that's pass first and win now, between where Cousins is at in his career and Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison. We'll obviously talk about those guys here shortly, but I'm kind of passing on Mattison left and right, guys. Like for a while there, he was going so late, like you could pick him up in the 8th round or something like that. It was worth it. But now that he's creeping up into the 5th, like I don't want it. Like it's too rich for my blood. I'm going to go other directions. And not that he can't play, he can. We've seen snapshots of what Alexander Mattison can do. Obviously, Minnesota felt comfortable enough with Mattison that they released Dalvin Cook because they didn't want to pay him. But I'm going to let it be someone else's headache, honestly. Like, you try and hope he stumbles out of the gate and just has a terrible start and then maybe buy low on the trade market. But to draft, I don't like the capital that I have to spend now, and then I'm going to have to continue to spend as we get closer to the start of the regular season for Alexander Mattison. The time to buy him was 5-6 weeks ago when he was way down there and people weren't, for whatever reason, kind of picking up on it. I did get some shares of him down there because I felt like the value is there in the 8th, 9th round. Now that he's jumped 3.5, 4 rounds in ADP, no, thank you. I'm going to let someone else deal with it, and I'm going to pivot. I will go somewhere. I will look at the wide receiver room and try and round out that core. Or I will honestly, I'll look at it like Miles Sanders. Like I would rather have Miles Sanders and kind of look at things in that area, if you will. So best of luck to him. I hope he does well and makes it work, but it's too rich for my blood. So his current ADP and going forward, I think I'm going to be out on Alexander Mattison.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I tried to play this game with Alexander Mattison the last couple of years, thinking like, he's Dalvin Cook's handcuff, and then it never really materialized. And he did have, a few games where he did have, his standalone value, but realistically, like he was nothing more than Dalvin Cook's backup, not even really a handcuff, but a backup. And when Dalvin Cook went out, that offense kind of changed. With the emergence of Justin Jefferson, with the emergence of, the Vikings needing to capitalize on what they have left of Kirk Cousins and what they have, still there, they made the moves to do that. And one of those involved getting rid of Dalvin Cook in that running game. So I think that kind of throws a signal as to where they think, what this offense is going to look like, because Dalvin Cook, good running back, still had plenty of tread on the tires, in my opinion. And a little wild that he's still, unsigned right now as we talk about this in the back half of July. But I think with Mattison, it is you're going to draft him too high, and you're not going to get the value back for the draft pick. So you might as well just turn and look a different direction.
Yeah. I mean, right now he's coming off the board coming off the board of running back 1957 overall. So you're talking tail end of the 5th round there. And there's 4 or 5 running backs that I'd far rather go with in that one. And especially kind of, how we've kind of progressed through some of this, especially if you're going like a 0 RB type of approach, or you're even going for some depth in the 5th round at the RB position. J.K. Dobbins is there. Miles Sanders, Dameon Pierce. I'd rather have every one of those guys over Alexander Mattison this season for fantasy. And that's how I'm going to draft it. So I'm going to be out on where he currently is on ADP. And it's not going to surprise me to see him continue to kind of climb the spots a couple of more and maybe even see him get into like a 4th round or an early 5th round ADP by the time redraft gets done. So out on current ADP and probably going to be even more out on him as the ADP continues to creep up. Tyler Chandler is there, who finished running back 146 last year, 6 rush attempts, 20 yards, 0 touchdowns, 0 receptions. Thoughts on Ty Chandler?
Pass.
Short, sweet, to the point. I like it.
Yeah, there's too much noise behind Mattison, right? Like, Madison's 1, but then there's a bunch of noise behind that for who's number 2. And in redraft leagues, I'm not looking for noise off of a team that passes so much in the running back room. So I will pivot and go other directions. Pass.
Cosign.
Heck of a special teams player, though. I will give him that. Alrighty. DeWayne McBride, the rookie, drafted in the 7th round, pick 222 out of UAB. Thoughts on DeWayne McBride?
We'll fight for the number 2 position, kind of see where it goes, right? But again, pass for all the same reasons.
Cosign.
Concur. I had to do something different to say agree, but
nice.
Yeah, I think you guys are right there. He could be interesting though, as far as, when that depth chart finally gets settled, if he really is the number 2, as a potential handcuff, since he's going so late in drafts. You don't even have to necessarily draft him. You can pick him up off the waiver wire as a handcuff potential. So be interesting to see how this thing progresses during training camp. Let's go ahead and head over to the wide receivers. Justin Jefferson, who was wide receiver 1 last year, 128 receptions, 184 targets, 1,809 yards, 8 touchdowns, an average of 10.8 targets per game. Thoughts on Justin Jefferson?
Smash yes. Like, if you are in a single quarterback league and you have the 1st overall pick, this is the pick, period.
Yeah. Again, we said there were very few earlier in this episode. I said there are very few no-brainers. This is, again, a no-brainer. If you have the ability to draft Justin Jefferson, you draft Justin Jefferson.
Yes, Justin Jefferson, good at football, good for fantasy football. Hit the draft button, move on. Riveting analysis on Justin Jefferson. Let's go ahead and head on over to Jordan Addison. Jordan Addison, rookie, drafted in the 1st round, pick 23 out of USC. Thoughts on Jordan Addison?
I think Jordan Addison has the potential to be inside the top 24 by the time the season's done with as much as Minnesota throws the ball. I like what he's going to be able to do, and he's going to be able to have time to kind of learn on his own because so much attention is going to be on Jefferson, Hockenson, which we'll talk about here shortly, KJ Osborn, who can help fill in. There's a ton of weapons here, but when it comes down to it, Addison will end up being kind of that number 2 guy there. You could see him sneak into the top 24. I think realistically, he probably finishes 27 to 30, I think is realistically where he is. But I do think his ceiling's probably wide receiver 22 as a rookie. It's red zone dependent, right? Like, can he create separation in the red zone and score touchdowns? And if he can, that's where it's going to come in. So I like him a lot in best ball. That way you're not going to have to deal with some of those rookie growing pains. You only get to worry about his successes. And then, more power to you. I'm taking him in a lot of cases. I'm taking him or JSN, right? Like I flip-flop back and forth in rookie drafts this year, whether I wanted JSN or Addison. So I got pieces of both of them, right? I didn't want to be overloaded on one guy, so I spread it out a little bit. But I think that there is a very likely chance that Addison's a better pro long-term than what JSN is.
I think what you have to look at here is the role that Addison is going to play, right? Like, Adam Thielen is gone, right? And so now opposite of Justin Jefferson will be Jordan Addison. I'm not saying that Jordan Addison is the vacuum that Adam Thielen was, and I don't think that Adam Thielen, obviously he played a very good second fiddle to Justin Jefferson as he emerged. But last year, Adam Thielen had 70 catches on 107 targets and 6 touchdowns. I don't think that's out of the question for Jordan Addison. It's numbers in that ballpark, and I'm trying to quickly look this up while I am talking about where Adam Thielen finished last year. And that was 36. Wide receiver 36 is what I see. Is that correct? Somebody want to double check me on that? Which is wide receiver 3 territory, right? It's the end of the bottom half of wide receiver 3 territory. So here's what you have to understand with Jordan Addison. He's going to get probably the same amount of looks that Adam Thielen got last year playing opposite of Justin Jefferson. He's going to get probably the same amount of, coverage that Adam Thielen got as teams worry about Justin Jefferson beating them. It may be a little different because there's not the threat of a Dalvin Cook running the football anymore, but I still think that that's kind of how you have to view Jordan Addison is, what Adam Thielen did last year, probably pretty similar to what Jordan Addison is going to do this year.
Minus the touchdown part. I don't
Correct. I think getting 6 touchdowns is going to be pretty hard to do.
Right. Jordan Addison, I think, will return some value for you. I think that there's some other guys in the draft capital that I'm going to have to spend on redraft that I'd probably rather go with over the Jordan Addison pick. But I might take a shot on him here and there a couple of times throughout some of my various leagues. But Alex, you're talking about a very similar finish to what Adam Thielen had last year. I'm kind of right there in the same ballpark with you. I think that when it's all said and done, we probably see him get about 65 catches, around about 750 yards, and I'm thinking probably about 4 touchdowns. So, I could see him very much get into that kind of middle of wide receiver 3 territory there. And that can potentially return a little bit of value for you because he's coming off the board, wide receiver 40 overall. So if he outperforms that by a couple of spots, not going to surprise me. But I think that, you're kind of drafting what you can get. There's some other guys in that same kind of draft capital that I'd rather go with just on some potentially bigger upswing and upside there. But overall, he should do well for you. And I think Kevin made that point very well when he said that, long term, this guy has a very bright future ahead of him. So, this year I may end up with Jordan Addison on a few of my rosters, but probably more likely to move in some other directions there. KJ Osborn was wide receiver 45 last year, 60 reception, 90 targets, 650 yards, 5 touchdowns, an average of 5.3 targets per game. Thoughts on KJ Osborn?
Pass. Surprisingly, pass. Like I think before Addison, I wanted a piece of him because I think he could have at least posted wide receiver 3 type numbers. But with Addison in play, I think you're looking at a wide receiver 5 with no real upside. Like there's no clear path to targets and efficiency for KJ Osborn. Maybe in a best ball league, you take a flyer on him thinking that there might be a week or two he pops and return some value as a late round pick there. But in redraft leagues, I'm going to pivot away from KJ Osborn. I think I can find some other areas where I can improve my roster and look for some players who might have a little bit higher target share or their efficiency ratings might be a little bit higher than what Osborn's is going to be.
Yeah. He is also in that kind of meh area that we were talking about with like a Tyler Boyd earlier. So it's a dart throw. I think there, as Derek said earlier, maybe a time to go look at a different position group and get what you're, fill out your roster that way. I think it's going to be tough for him to I think usurp Addison as that second option for Kirk Cousins. So realistically, like, yes, a compliment piece, but for fantasy purposes, it's going to be really tough to have him be a consistent contributor week in and week out.
Yeah, no, thank you. I'm going to go a different route there. Funny that you mentioned different position groups and going a different route there. Matthew Stafford, Cole Kmet, Jordan Love, all kind of in that range. I would rather draft every one of those guys over KJ Osborn for this season. So Gerald Everett also in that range. Michael Gallup. Yep, I'm going other directions than KJ Osborn there. Genji on YouTube said KJ Osborn best ball round 20 only. LOL. I can't disagree with that one. So, alrighty. let's go ahead and head over to TJ Hockenson, who was tight end 2 last season, 86 receptions, 129 targets, 914 yards, 6 touchdowns, and average of 7.6 targets per game. Thoughts on TJ Hockenson?
So Hockenson was hyper targeted towards the back end of the season once he went to Minnesota. And as he was hyper targeted, you saw Adam Thielen's drop down, right? Like Thielen just was not dynamic enough to get open in that offense. That being said, I think some of his targets are going to end up going to Addison. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a little bit of a regression to tight end 4 or 5, but then that falls a little bit closer in line to where he's being drafted, right? Like he's coming off the board at tight end 3 right now, 4, depending on your league format and what you're doing. And I think that's an okay landing spot, right? Like there's going to be some weeks that are just duds, but I do think that you're going to see probably some more consistency out of TJ Hockenson than what you saw in Detroit, just due to the nature of this Vikings offense. So good blocker, hell of a pass catcher. He's going to be able to help suck up some of that underneath stuff and allow Jefferson and Addison to stay out wide outside the numbers and compete one-on-one. It's going to come down to touchdown dependency. Is he able to fall into the end zone 7 or more times? That's a big number for a tight end. But given the rate at which the Vikings are passing with, I think you could see him fall in there, like I said, 6, 7, maybe 8 times. Like you could see a big touchdown season out of TJ Hockenson to make up for the lack of targets compared to last year.
What I especially like about his situation now is that Kirk Cousins is kind of that path of least resistance passer. So like Kirk Cousins will take those shots, right? But he will also find the open man and take the easy play, take the open play. And a lot of times if teams are, worried about Justin Jefferson or worried about whoever else is going to be outside there, then that does open up a few things inside. And Kirk Cousins, a very smart quarterback, will find that open man, and that's usually going to be that tight end position. So we did see, his efficiency when he got traded to Minnesota, and how, if you were to stat that out kind of throughout the course of his season, he still finished tight end 2, which is great. But I think that's what you kind of have to temper that. And Derek, if you have it pulled up, please tell me his ADP at the moment.
47 overall, third tight end. Yep.
Yeah.
Fourth rounder.
That's about right. I think in terms of, that second run of tight ends, and I say that second run of tight ends, really it's the first run of tight ends after Travis Kelce goes in the first round. That's about the value that you're going to get. I think he'll return some of it, but he's going where he should be going, in my opinion.
Yeah. There's certainly some things that, again, right. We talked a lot about kind of razor thin margins on this one. The tight end position outside of Travis Kelce is one that I'm going to kick that can down the road and take the late round tight end type of deal. Because in the fourth round, I'd rather go and get my second wide receiver, my second running back. I'd rather be building out some of these guys that are going to probably be a little bit more consistent on that, and guys that have the potential to, be a bigger part of the offense on that one. Not the guy that's going to, anyway. So fourth round's a little bit rich for me on that one. And like we've said all off season, it's Travis Kelce or bust, right? So you're either drafting Travis Kelce up high, or you're going to just wait on the tight end position and wait until you get down there in the 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th round type of thing to do that. And that's where I kind of see this one playing out there. Just because, again, right, like you've got some positional difference making, that kind of stuff. It's not enough of a separator on what else I'm going to miss out on there. So there's about zero chance that you're going to see TJ Hockenson on any of my rosters, just due to the draft capital on that one. Kirk Cousins, QB7, 424 yards, 424 completions, 643 attempts, 65.9% completion percentage, 4,547 yards, 29 touchdowns, 14 interceptions, 31 rush attempts, 97 yards, 2 touchdowns. Thoughts on Kirk Cousins?
He finds a way inside the top 12, and I think he's gonna end up there again. Like, I don't know why we don't just start ranking him there, but the industry, right, has not figured that out yet. So he's still going outside the top 12. He's honestly, he's a great super flex number 2. Like, if you pair, like if you're really looking to set yourself apart in a super flex, he is a great number 2. And being able to pair him up with one of those top end guys. So I like Kirk Cousins. I like what he's doing there in Minnesota. I think it's a lot of fun. So my stamp of approval there. I like him. And I think that you're going to see him, again, finish at QB 12 or better. So you will see a built-in advantage by waiting a little bit. You grab him and call it good.
I think it is absolutely wild how we trash. I'd say we trash, but like we have this perception that Kirk Cousins is not a good quarterback, and yet he has Justin Jefferson on his roster. Like, Justin Jefferson doesn't become the best receiver fantasy wise without a good quarterback throwing it to him. And so, like, just built in on that, like, that's where you have to understand that Kirk Cousins has value. And yet, we would, if it was Patrick Mahomes throwing to Justin Jefferson, we'd be like, oh, it's because it's Patrick Mahomes. But, like, for some reason, there's this perception that Kirk Cousins is not the reason why Justin Jefferson is, scoring as much or has as much fantasy value as he does. I have fallen victim of it myself. And I thought, like, oh, Kirk Cousins, he's just a ho-hum, high efficiency, right? Like, the dude completes a lot of his passes. But, like, not really a shot taker, not somebody that you think. But then, at the end of the season, there he is at QB7. And you're like, how in the hell did that happen? Like, how did Kirk Cousins end up QB7? Well, he's got Justin freaking Jefferson catching footballs for him. That helps. So I agree. As a solid super flex, second quarterback in the super flex. But honestly, if you're in a single quarterback league, like, he's gonna finish in the top 12. Yes, his running numbers or lack thereof aren't exciting, and there are more exciting options because of higher ceilings. But, like, you want to talk about safe floor and just getting consistency on a weekly basis, that is Kirk Cousins. And so if you want safe, you go with Kirk Cousins. I know that's not always exciting, but sometimes safe will get you wins.
Yeah. Yeah, this is one of those that Kirk Cousins, consistently is just a guy that you can put on your roster as a late QB and will perform very well for you. And a guy that, where he's coming off the board at QB 12, baked in value, because I think you're drafting him at his absolute floor on this one. Pick, it's an 8th, 9th round type of pick there again, right? Like, again, very good value in that one. So if I'm sitting there and I'm waiting late for a quarterback and it gets down to it and Tua's comes off the board a little bit before me and Dak comes off the board just a little bit before me, I've got no problem pulling the trigger on Kirk Cousins and having him be, my QB in a single QB league there. And then, playing the, streaming QB a little bit if I need to here and there based on some matchups. But overall, the guy finds a way to get it done and does very well for fantasy. So yeah, I'm in on it. It's no problem putting Kirk Cousins on the roster there.
Also, like, somebody who is fantastic. I say fantastic, but, like, just solid for fantasy, has also just fleeced every single owner he's ever played for with his contracts. Like, have you gone and seen, like, what his contracts in terms of guaranteed money that Kirk Cousins has gotten? And the money that he has gotten versus the amount of playoff wins that he has, it is astronomically different. But power to him, man. Power to him for getting his, because that man has set himself up and done a very nice job of getting money and honestly delivering. You know, he's delivering wins, at least, maybe not ones that really matter, but he's delivering wins throughout the regular season.
Actually, it's funny you sat there and said that, and I went and looked it up. So far,
the guaranteed money, that's the crazy one, right?
Well, even without the guaranteed money at the end of this season, he will have earned $230 million through
Kirk Cousins
through 12 seasons. Like the dude should teach a master's class on
I don't know how he did it.
Contract negotiations, right?
He is the freaking man when it comes to fleecing NFL owners. It's awesome.
So, absolutely. All right. Well, any other thoughts here on the? I like this comment here.
Yeah.
Genji saying the world-class finesser indeed. Indeed, he is. Indeed. So, all right, guys. Any other thoughts here on the Cousins of Kirk or the Minnesota Vikings?
You like that?
I do like that.
You like that? Sorry, that's
like
another
that.
Kirk Cousins.
Yes. Yes, we all remember that Monday night.
They probably got bounced from the season the next week. It was great.
Yes. Yes. All righty. Well, I think that's going to bring us down here to the end of it. Any final thoughts out there for the viewers and the listeners?
Stay tuned, right? Still got some running backs that need to find landing spots. We got some running backs who I guess are holding out here at the moment. I guess it's not really holding out because they're not under contract. They're just not signing a contract. So definitely some things being shuffled up, but we're going to finish up these team breakdowns here in the next couple weeks, and then we get into draft season, right? And then we start talking strategies and draft pockets and, players who we think are going to exceed ADPs or players that we think are really going to kind of maybe not bust, but underperform, if you will. So lots of fun stuff. It's getting into the time of season that we like best, because while these player profiles are fun, the drafts are really the fun part of fantasy football. And then you get into the grind of managing rosters, but the drafts were at. So hit us up with questions. Thank you for tuning in. Like, subscribe at Good Old Boys FF, wherever you get your digital content.
I like it. Alex, short, sweet, and to the point. All righty. So Kevin just said it, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, all the socials at Good Old Boys FF. Do us a favor. Head over to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/@GoodOldBoysFF. Click the subscribe button, ring the bell. Like we said earlier, we're going to start getting those player profile videos on the individual players cut up, and they're going to be released in about a week or so, I think is the time that we're working on there. And that way you can get those bite-sized nuggets of info there as you guys get ready and prep for your draft there. So make sure you're hitting that up, hit that subscribe button. And best way to support the Independent Podcast is those subscriptions on the YouTube. We're making that march, trying to get that monetization there. So help us out there if you would. That's going to do it for us. He's Kevin. He's Alex. I'm Derek. Have a good one. Be safe. Toodaloos.